Welcome, Aaron Child, our Ibex Bouldering guidebook author, to the chat that
Yay.
we still don't have a great catchy name for. Um,
It's coming.
but it's coming. It'll happen. Maybe even in this chat, we'll think of it organically. And um, Aaron is an awesome developer and climber in Salt Lake City. We were just chatting about how during my years in Salt Lake, we only maybe crossed paths once very briefly. So a lot of this history that I'll be learning about Aaron is new for me as well. And so maybe we could just start there, Aaron, and you could tell us a bit about yourself and your background and your
Yeah,
profession, your history with Ibex, that sort of stuff.
cool. Yeah, I was born in Colorado. Um, so I still have some kindness in my heart. And moved to Provo when I was 12. But my parents got me into climbing uh, around age 9 or 10. It was an extracurricular activity at the school that I was going to. And, I climbed trees a ton as a kid and living in the foothills, the Rockies in Colorado. I was, climbing rock outcroppings, and they figured that that would be a good outlet for me, which it turned out to be. And got outside at 9 or 10, maybe a handful of times. But I was mostly like a gym kid at the no longer Paradise Rock Gym. Um, and then moved to Provo when I was 12 and hated it because I didn't find my tribe at all. And it's a hard time to move to a new place. Um, so I was going to the quarry, the gym down there, with my older brother, and Rock Canyon was very close. Um, and when my brother got a driver's license, we would go up there just to hike around, just like, oh yeah, outdoor climbing. Like we used to do it in Colorado. Let's see what's up here. And we found sport routes up there, and we only had one. We had one quick draw at the time, and we brought it, and we were just like, oh no, we need way more of these. And so it's a long process of climbing in the gym and then like saving our money to get like a rope and draws, um, and we started going out to Rock Canyon by ourselves and trying to lead these 5-7 slab routes on quartzite, and just getting completely smashed. And before long, my brother stopped climbing, um, and some guys, namely Darren Kinesic, Scott Adamson, they took me under their wing when I was like 16 years old because I was hanging around Mountain Works, the shop back then, just like the weird nerdy kid, just trying to be friends with everybody older than me. And so hanging around, they took me under their wing. Scott specifically, taught me how to climb in the desert, crack climb. Darren, he was taking me out to a lot of his new crags in Rock Canyon. Taught me how to project routes that were hard for me at the time. Um, and we were also ice climbing a lot back then. And I didn't start really bouldering until uh, like 18 years old, going out to Triassic, this area in central Utah near Joe's. And but it was kind of like dabbling. It was always something that like it was like, oh yeah, there's bouldering when you can't like do anything else. It's like kind of fun, like once or twice a year to go out there. And I ended up going to Berklee College of Music in Boston, moving out there when I was 21. And the closest climbing was this area outside of Boston called Lynn Woods. It's like super sharp, super kind of heinous on the skin, but it's like the local choss pile. It's like your choss pile. Um, so went there a bunch, and then Lincoln Woods in Rhode Island. Um, Went there a lot as well, just because they were like the closest, kind of easiest things. And I was climbing a lot in the Gunks and North Conway when I could. It's kind of hard to find climbing friends out there. Um, and that was the first time that I was like, okay, well, I have bouldering. Bouldering is like a way to go climbing, and I'm psyched on it. Um, and then I came home after graduating and started getting psyched on all these sport routes. All these 513 Jeff Pedersen awesome routes in American Fork. And I remember the day that I was just falling on this. I think they rate it 13C now. Invisible Man at the billboard, and I was so sick of falling time and time again because like it. I was an endurance climber growing up. I could hold on forever. That's why I kind of gravitated towards desert climbing. So I was really frustrated that I like couldn't hold on, and I was just kind of like, screw this, I'm going bouldering. And it was late November, and for whatever reason, like Joe's or Moe's didn't even cross my mind. I was like, I'm gonna go to Ibex, and I have the Black Bible, and I just went out there by myself, um, and I remember V4s and fives just being insanely hard, and I was just like, whoa. It's like this is new and this is really hard. And it was kind of a little bit of a blow to my ego, which I enjoyed because I don't know, I like learning new things and kind of leveling playing fields. And I really wanted to learn how to climb there. And so I just kept going back. And with the Black Bible, it was like kind of like a treasure hunt, because the beta is good, but it's you still kind of have to like drive around and figure out where everything is. Um, and every every problem took me 3 days to do. It didn't matter the grade. And it was kind of like, it made me realize it's like, oh, maybe grades don't really matter. It's just like what's hard for you is going to take this amount of time, and that's okay, you know?
Mhm.
And it wasn't like every problem wasn't so far above me that I got really frustrated. So it was like relatively attainable, but I remember just like climbing these V5s and then getting on these V7s. And it was like, I'm just like trying the same amount of hard on all of these things. It was like kind of cool to realize that. Um, and it was a great winter kind of haven. Um, you go down there and it's this funny little microclimate. Um, the big peaks surrounding that, namely Notch Peak and Wheeler Peak, they have a way of attracting a lot of the weather. So Ibex usually stays dry, and so we'd be socked in Salt Lake Valley, and there are clouds over Notch Peak maybe, and you'd go out there and it's like 45 degrees and sunny, and it's just like, what? It's awesome. Um, so I I like feeling like I'm getting away with something in climbing. So like desert towers, sometimes you feel like that, where you're just like, man, I don't know how I pulled that up, but now we're at the top, and that's cool. And it kind of feels like that in Ibex, where you're like, man, it's 30 degrees and no one's climbing, and they're complaining about not climbing, but I am climbing and I have a suntan. So and just kind of went head first into bouldering, and kind of moved up the grades, and I'm still continuing to try and do that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of me and my history with Ibex.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. What year would you reckon that was that you first kind of made your first trip out there?
That was let's see. So I got home from Boston in 2013. I would say that was 2015.
Okay. And at that time, I mean, I came to Utah in 2017, and when I started going out to Ibex, it was pretty rare to see anyone else, or maybe there'd be one other party. Was it pretty desolate at that time?
Oh yeah. It there were a couple seasons where it got a little busy. Kind of with every crag. Ibex seems to fly under the radar more often than not. But every time I was going out there, it was like no one's out there, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. For sure, Little Haven, like you'll drive through snow and rain all the way there and be like, there's no way conditions are going to be good. And then you crest over that hill, and all of a sudden it's just sunny and beautiful.
It's so glorious, dude, because you're like, oh, we did it. It's like we're gonna have a great day. It's so exciting.
Yeah. And I feel like most Salt Lake climbers who do go to Ibex will go maybe once or twice or three times and typically stay in kind of the Red Monster area, which is the most accessible and well known. But uh, you know, your work, your guide, and even in the Black Bible, there were a lot of outlier areas included. And so maybe you can kind of like describe a little bit about some of the other zones that are worth visiting and part of all of these guides that we're excited about is kind of giving people the full breadth of an area and the tools to explore all of it and spread people out a little bit, because there certainly have been red monster days where it's a little too crowded. It's a small zone, and so I think spreading people out is really rad. And what are maybe some like problems you'd recommend elsewhere? Or yeah, that was a lot to go off of. But
Yeah, 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 totally. So when I was kind of rolling around Ibex, 10 years ago, um, it made me realize the quality of not only rock but boulder problems in these outlier areas. Like the Red Monster area is amazing, just because it's hyper concentrated. But I found myself being more blown away by the rock quality and movement in these outlier areas. And no matter what grade it was, like the amount of 4-star V2s in these outlier areas is kind of mind blowing. Like if you climbed V2 max, you would have a great time rolling around and climbing these V2s. And they're like, it's awesome. They're like, you could choose between tall or short boulders, but they're all like super inspiring and they're visually appealing. Um, I think the area that blew me away uh, was the Black Hills. So that's like the hand boulder, the 0 point field. Um, those boulders were put up by the guys who did the FA of Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. Um, and I couldn't even imagine like them finding those boulder fields because like from the road you look over to these hills and you can see uh like the Skull Rock Pass boulders, and you're like, oh, those are cool. But the hills beyond that, you're like, oh, no way there are boulders there. And it's not until you drive there where you're just like, whoa, like these boulders kind of came out of nowhere. They're all like hiding in these little valleys, and the amount of boulder problems from V0 to let's say let's see V9. Kieran put up something that is he called V7, but we all know what the truth is. Uh, uh, it's just incredible, dude. Like I climbed this V0 in the 0 point field, and it's insane. Like it's near the top of this hill, and it's overlooking the Sevier Lake, and you can see the Tusher Mountains far in the distance, and you're hanging out in the sun, and you're climbing like some of the best rock quality in Utah. And it's this V0, so you're just and it's interesting, it's not just like a jug ladder, it has like very cool moves, and they called it stuff. They just called it stuff. This like 4-star V0. They're just like, oh yeah, we're gonna call it stuff. It's like, dude, that's insane. So, uh, after climbing that, I was like, dude, this is insane. Rolling through all those boulders, just seeing the rock quality, um, and just the quality of problems are insane, dude. It's and I was thinking the other day it could be cool. To do these like font-esque circuits, because Red Monster is concentrated. Um, these areas kind of are too. It would be cool to try and do every problem, V4 and under in a day in like 0 point field. Go to the hand and do all those. Go to Burnout Pass and do, every problem from V0 to V7. And so it's cool because you can max out on your grades, but you can also do these like high volume days, which what I was doing for the Kaya guide, because I try and climb every problem to try and give it a star, uh, star grade, um, and just to be an expert of the area. So I'd go out there and climb like 25 boulders from V0 to like V8, and just be completely smashed at the end of the weekend and be like, whoa, that was very cool. Because like, dude, 25 boulders is a lot. That's a lot of boulders. It doesn't even matter if they're like mostly V0 through V4. It's like your feet hurt, you're kind of tired for a weird reason, and it's like I don't know, man. It's cool to kind of change things. I feel like these days we have such a conquering mentality of like how hard you can push, which is like very valuable. Um, but man, those funk guys were definitely onto something with the circuits and the high volume.
Yeah, you can make some lists in Kaya of
Yeah.
like circuits, and then folks can kind of follow along and have that experience. Yeah, and that's super valuable to have those super high quality, easier problems because it's I think we all know it's like a little harder to come by in say Little Cottonwood. It's not like a very beginner friendly area, but
There's Joe's, man.
yeah, and Joe's yeah, you're right. It's not as friendly either. So say someone's listening to this, they're a newer climber. What kind of or they've just never been to Ibex, what kind of advice would you prepare someone with, in terms of like filling up your tank and any sort of like Ibex specific beta?
Yeah, totally. So I would definitely fill up your gas tank in Delta. I stop at the Mav and get a breakfast burrito because they're surprisingly good.
Are
If you are psyched on climbing in the main area, so like Red Monster, um, I would be cautious about driving over the hard pan, especially in the winter, because that can be muddy. Um, and I know a couple of people who have gotten stuck and who have had to get a tow from Delta, which is $500. So there's a way that you can drive around the dry lake bed. Um, it's all detailed in the guide. And you don't want to get stuck out there. You don't have great service. You'd be able to get out, but it would suck for sure. Um, for conditions, I would say look at NOAA or weather.gov, so NOAA. Um, I've climbed out there 18 degrees, sunny, no wind, and been in shorts and a t-shirt. But you have to look at the wind speed because if it gets more than 15 miles an hour, then you're kind of hosed when it's cold. Um, I've climbed there 35 degrees and overcast, and it has been awful. And so look in the winter, look for sun. The warmer it gets, look for clouds, but always pay attention to the wind speed.
nice. Yeah, that's definitely I've had both of those experiences as well. Those crags, that's super legit.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking maybe we could talk about just some of the unique problems. I feel like Ibex has like a lot of fun, unique things. Like Fister comes to mind. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that at least when I was in Salt Lake, no one really climbed Fister. I think maybe it got one or two ascents in the 5 years I lived there, and it's an old Charmer line. Maybe like describe that one a bit for people. Like it's something I feel like should get more action.
Yeah, so it's this really cool boulder. At the start, you're climbing through these slopey wacos on like that rad gray quartzite that is just so bomber. And you do a couple of moves of traversing, and then you have to kind of move fairly dynamically to this. It's not really a fist jam like you think fist jam, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be like pulling from here. I did this like funny little bear claw thing, and I guess it's a fist jam, but you just like try as hard as you can to squeeze, and then Kiram, he didn't move dynamically, but I like hucked to this pretty good jug. I think that's the cooler way to do it. In that move, you just feel like a hero. because not only does it hurt, but you're moving to a jug and the move's hard and it's really cool. And then it's like a few moves of like pretty interesting but not super hard climbing, but like your feet cut and it's a very cool style and it's a style that is pretty common in Ibex where you have to employ these crack techniques, but it's still like quite sporty, you know. The middle finger, the hand boulder in the Black Hills is you can climb it by squeezing, but you like throw to this finger lock, and then I like kind of move dynamically to this like butterfly jam in the crack, and but it's still like feel like you're bouldering, but you're using these crack techniques, and it's like it's very cool. It's like I don't know if that's old school necessarily, but it feels like it. It feels cool.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is worth mention about Fister is like you're jamming, but you're not jamming in like a crack. You're
Mm.
actually jamming in uh like a scooped out feature of the rock that I don't even know how to best describe it. If you're looking at it, it kind of comes like this shape and you jam your fist into it like that, right? And
You look. It looks like you can just kind of side pull it because it's
yeah,
like it's a weird swoop, and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go like this, but you can't. Like Joel Zur tried that thing forever. He's like, oh, I just want to. I don't want to fist jam. I want to. I want to like, side pull it. I'm like, you can't do it, dude. Kira was the same too. He's like, I don't want to fist jam. I was like, you have to. It's really cool. It's like it's not the way you think it would go, which is
mhm.
really sweet.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's an awesome one. I only tried it one time and I dry fired out of the jam and like tore a flapper on both sides of my hand. So wanted to go
That's
back.
it. Yeah, dude.
Maybe you could share a little bit about what you know of the Ibex history, like who were some of the first people to climb there, if you have that knowledge. And uh do you remember what the video was called where they did like Pan Galactic and the hand and all those FAs? I'd
It's
love
called.
to kind of resurface that because I saw it years ago and that's in a classic video as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
dude, it's so awesome. So that video is called Outliers.
right.
Um, it's I found it just the other day. Rob Gwynn is a Salt Lake local dude, and it was on his Vimeo page for a while. It took me a little while to find it. I don't know if that was intentional or not. Um, but yeah, dude, that video is so good. Um, just classic, just hard climbing techno. Just like good vibes all around. Um, so I know that John Sherman was the first dude to kind of boulder out there in the early 90s. And he developed problems on Skull Rock, so Skull Rock Pass. And then he put up problems on the Red Monster. Um, and then Salt Lake Crew moved in the late 90s. Jonathan Knight and Ian Glass, they're Salt Lake legends. They established Jew, that's no longer there, it exploded. Um, and those guys, they are they're mega developers. You see their name kind of everywhere. Um, they're rad. And then like kind of the main offenders, like Boone Speed and Mike Call, Jeff Baldwin, um, John Cronin. They moved in and developed more. And then the outlier areas like Candyland and Crystal Peak. Um, that was Rob Gwynn, um, Mark Russo, Mike Mott. And I know Shannon Cornelia was kind of rolling around with those guys as well. Um, and then after that, dude, it's I don't know of many. if anybody after those guys to put up boulders, and they kind of got the cherry lines, you know. Um, and it's been interesting for myself doing the guide and looking at the problems that they put up that were in the Black Bible, and kind of looking at the lines in between and being like, oh, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do that? You know, and doing fun link ups or obvious, moderates. Um, and then Kieram's put up a handful of very hard and bold problems as well. Um, but between me and Kieram and those guys, I don't know of anybody else who's kind of developed out there.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe you mentioned briefly that like Jew
Mhm.
once was, and there's a classic video on YouTube that's kind of resurfaced recently in the algorithm of uh I think it's like 25 most classic boulders in North America or something, and it's an all women's cast. Have you seen this video?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And someone climbs Jew in it, and yeah, for a long time, I feel like Jew, the V6, was one of the most famous problems anywhere and one of the most sought after. And I had heard some like rumors about what happened when it went up in flames, but maybe do you know the full story? Is it something?
Yeah. So apparently, there were some guys. I think they were Delta locals. Um, they were camping under the boulder. You can drive right up to the boulder, and they were camping under it, and they just lit a ginormous bonfire. And there were these guys that were sport climbing there. Um, they were getting off of a route, and they saw the fire, and they were going to go talk to him and be like, "Hey, you shouldn't do this." And then they just heard this like crack, and they watched it just. And it started out as this like flake esque kind of system, um, but those holds were pretty crucial to getting up to these higher pockets. Um, and that whole thing just exploded. Um, so,
Hmm.
I mean, it's just kind of the nature of it being BLM and multi-use. Anyone can go out there, and um, yeah, it's just a shame that happened to such a rad boulder.
Yeah, and I know Kiram climbed it after with the holds that remained. Have you climbed it as well since then?
It's nasty.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's like very very Kiram. You start on these like one the right hand's like a pretty good jug, but you go out to this three finger pocket, and it's so sharp, dude, and it just hurts. And the move up to the pockets that you go to is like it's just nasty, dude. It's cool that it still goes, but it's not as fun as the original line.
Yeah, yeah, that's too bad. But Blue Flowers and Bruce Lee are still kicking it, right? And Wing
Yeah.
Chun, of course, which Wing Chun is that a James that's a James Litz FA, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen an old video of that too, and he does a crazy method that no
Yeah.
one he grabs like a non-existent little hold in the middle, I believe.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. I think the first time I saw that problem done was that old Dave Graham video. And it's, I think that problem is such a good example of the hard climbing in Ibex. I have a buddy, Casey Webb. Um, he lives in Cedar City now, but he said something kind of interesting. He's like, the hard problems in Ibex, you just have to stare at the rock long enough, and they'll they'll like reveal themselves to you. And I feel like with Wing Chun, it's like perfect. You're like, you kind of look at those features and kind of like pass them by. But the harder you look, you're like, oh, actually, there are holds here. And it's actually really hard, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned Casey. We were actually we just got connected this week and we're chatting a bunch about our respective projects and skin control and everything, friction control.
Yeah,
He's an awesome guy.
he
Uh,
is.
yeah, um, so you said that you've kind of like worked your way through the grades at Ibex and climbed a bunch of the classics. What are some of the like standout experiences you've had, or projects that took you a while, or memorable moments?
Yeah. When I did Bone Collector, which is V11, it was really cool because uh, getting on it, it was right at that level where it was just underneath the too hard kind of level where I was like, oh, I can do some moves, but there are other moves that I like can't quite do, but like just kind of barely, you know. And session after session, I would just keep getting closer and closer and closer. And it has this heartbreaker move at the top where you're on these small crimps and you have to smear on this really slopey foot at the lip, make this ginormous move to a sloper. You think it's going to be good. And the move itself is probably like V2. But after you've hugged the fridge that is Bone Collector, like that move is a heartbreaker. Speaking of Casey Webb, I saw him punter that move time and time again. He got so mad he kicked a pad. And so I was falling there like my fifth session on it. Um, Frustrated but still psyched, you know. And when I sent um, the day that I sent, I'm a morning climber guy. Afternoons are pretty hard for me. So I was out there rolling around, and afternoon comes along, and I was like, oh man, maybe I should just try it once, and put my pads down, sent it first try that day, and I got to small crimps, and I remember doing the move, and after that, you kind of have to hike your feet up, and you kind of have to mantle with your left hand pretty hard. And I remember getting to the sloper and then just being like, I can't blow it here. And I screamed so loud, and my screams are probably reverberating around the desert to this day. And it was just a very cool moment to just pull on, do it first try really, really hard. And I just kind of sat at the top of the boulder, just like, I don't know if you've ever had those experiences where you send these hard boulders and you're it's like a moment of disbelief where you're just like, what just happened? um, but that was very cool. That was a very cool day. Um, the same thing kind of happened to me on Bruce Lee. I was out there with one of my buddies, Ian, and it's just getting closer and closer and closer. And then I did the crux move. I come into that gas stone near the crack, and my my foot blew, and I was just like, no, and I couldn't get back to that moment uh, that day. And then the next time I did it first try. Um, those moments are kind of magical, you know. Um, Ibex has such an interesting style where it's you can't really relax on any of the holes. It's all very tensiony, and you have to be technical, but you also have to be powerful, but you also have to hold this tension. Um, and the rock there can be slick, but you can also like toe in on these holds where you wouldn't think it would be possible. And you do these moves, and you're like, oh, I don't know how my foot's still on, but I'm doing it. And it kind of creates those magic moments where um, you find little glimpses of success, and um, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, the rock is pretty crazy there. I always when I think of Ibex rock, I think of the rock at the start of Bone Collector, where I always thought it looked like alien eggs or something, the way that There's kind of like those rounded, like white speckly
Mm.
bits with the patina around it. Um, and I think it's yeah, it's pretty unique for Utah. Maybe Ogden is a little bit similar sort of courts, but it's not quite as like tight and sticky. It's great stuff out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the fact that it is the purest quartzite in the world, that Eureka quartzite.
Uh,
Um,
More about that.
yeah, it's like it's 99.7% quartz. So how it formed, um, it was a beach in the Cambrian period, and back then, that area was at the end of the coastline, more or less, and so the sand would be blown down, and all of the fine grains would just be filtered into what is now Ibex. So all of those grains are very small, um, and just filtered. So you think of a beach, and you pick up the sand, and you have like they're the sand grains are all they're kind of all over the place. You get big ones, you get small ones. Um, but I think this beach was a little more like desert sand, very fine. Um, the quartzite in Ogden, similar, beach deposited, but uh, it's just seen a lot of uplift, so it's very fractured. Um,
Well, help me like understand. I'm not a geologist and have no understanding of geology. So it becomes sand. It's very fine sand in Ibex, and then how does it turn into the boulders and the sport climbing that is there
yeah.
today?
So for Ibex, that area, the basin and range area, um, the activity underneath the crust made it so that the area from the Wasatch to the Sierras is kind of bubbled up like this. And the crust is relatively thin to the rest of the nation. And for the basin and range, what happened is because of this uplift, you have these valleys that run north to south, same with mountain ranges. And you can see that in Ibex. You can see the quartzite layer that has been uplifted because of that activity underneath the crust. And then due to faulting, so cracks in the crust, the valleys collapsed, and then you have the cliffs that are the quartzite cliffs of Ibex. And then through weathering and erosion, you get the boulders that fall off from those cliffs. Um,
And so the sand at some point through like heat and pressure or something becomes the quartzite under the crust, and then it fractures, creates the cliffs. Okay,
sir, sir,
very cool. Wow,
you learned
nice.
something today.
Yeah, are you is geology just like a side passion for you, or?
A little bit, yeah. I studied geology before going to music school, um, just for a couple years. It's what I thought I wanted to do, but I at the time I just kind of wanted to be a rock climber. But so I'm just naturally curious about places. I like to kind of dive deep into areas and learn as much as I can about it, and just
Yeah.
like naturally curious.
And so do you know, like, for example, like at the start of Bone Collector there, where there's like kind of the white speckly rock, and then there's the patina. And
Mm.
I know that sometimes like with Jew, I imagine it's probably like sandier under the patina, right?
Hmm.
But it's all quartz. And is the quartz just like more weathered on the outside and that's kind of formed the patina crust?
Yeah. Ibex has the advantage of getting that desert varnish on it, that places like Ogden doesn't necessarily get. And the desert varnish, they think is due to microorganisms living in the water that drips down. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
That's actually a good segue. I just kind of want to touch on like crypto soil, respecting ibex because it is a fragile ecosystem. Maybe you can share some like guidelines for folks in terms of like, of course, leave no trace, but maybe some things that are a little more ibex specific.
Yeah, totally. The crypto out there can be very tricky to see. The crypto in the Moab area, like the Colorado Plateau, it's pretty obvious because it's like a couple inches thick, and it's black. And crypto is a mat of algae um, that retains moisture, and um, once that's destroyed, everything's turns to sand. But it's what keeps the desert alive. It's what allows plants to grow, and that in turn allows wildlife to survive there. So once you destroy it, that's it. It takes anywhere from 50 plus years to grow back. They've seen evidence in canyonlands where someone stepped on crypto, and then 50 years later, they're like, oh, yeah, it's like starting to grow back. Um, but they've also seen like after 100 years, like it still hasn't grown back. So in Ibex, it's really tricky to see because it can be pretty low, but it grows between all of the rocks on the ground. Um, so the big thing to do there is to follow washes and drainages to the boulders. Um, those can be hard to see as well, but the hiking maps on Kaya, um, I've made sure to follow the drainages. But even around the boulders, there can be crypto. So like once you're around the boulders, you're still not in the clear. Like crypto grows in crazy places. Um, and so you have to be mindful about where you step, um, even around the boulders. Um, I was there on Saturday putting up some new problems around the main area, and uh, around the boulder was like totally fine. But then like 4 feet away in this like 10-foot area, it's like, oh, that's where the crypto starts. And so you have to be all tiptoey and not put your pads on it, don't step on it. So always kind of be mindful. Um, you can sometimes it's easy to see when there is moss growing on it, because moss and other algae grows on there as well. They get this really pretty like pink and white moss that grows on it sometimes, which is really rad. Um, but yeah, follow washes, watch where you step. Um, just because it looks barren doesn't mean it is.
Yeah, and so the recommendations for people be like know what crypto looks like, try and find images online, prepare ahead of time, follow the trail as outlined in Kaya pretty closely so as to not be trouncing everywhere. And then once you're at the boulder, like we all like to go explore, but try to keep it relatively your impact relatively small and around the boulder. And if you are exploring, sticking to stepping on rocks or in washes is recommended. Cool. Nice. And yeah, I wanted to ask too, like, do you have any current projects out there that you're trying? You did Bone Collector, that was a big win. And uh have you moved on to any other lines?
Yeah, there are lines in the main area specifically that are just so hard, dude. So still have Wing Chun to do. Atomic Bomb I have yet to do, which is very hard, and then Clem's 10 I have yet to do. Uh, I'd be interested to get on Devil's Demon. I think that thing looks rad. Um, I actually have a funny story about that. It was like 7 years ago. I was climbing on the Phlogiston boulder just down the drainage from Devil's Demon, and I did Phlogiston, and then I was like, "Oh, that was rad. I wonder if there are any boulders like this." And I walked up that drainage, and I found Devil's Demon boulder, and I remember looking up at it and being like, "Oh man, bummer there are no holds on that." And then Kieran comes along, and he puts a problem up it. So the problems in the main area, they're really hard for me, and they'll take a while, even though like yeah, I've climbed Bone Collector. It's like the style there. It's just there are these problems that are just very hard, and so I still have those to do. Oh, and the Bear Jew
Oh
need to
yeah.
be
Does anybody ever climb on that?
no, which is
Fun.
a bummer because it's so cool.
Yeah, I called it that because, well, obviously it's right next to Jew, but I'm
Mhm.
also Jewish.
Yeah,
And when I was working at the time at the front, uh, Mike Bakina, the head setter, was calling me the Bear Jew, like referencing
Inglorious
Glorious
Bastards.
Bastards. And then I also, it was like one of those sunny, hot days when it was supposed to be cold, and I ended up climbing it like almost naked, just in my underwear. So it's good for a lot of reasons.
Right, totally. Yeah, that's a great problem, dude. It's awesome. I love how well, I just remembered I need to take back my comment about people not developing because you put up kind of it was rad. You like kind of ushered in that like kind of new school style, like compy style. Um, and I don't think anyone else would have done that. Like that was rad of you to put up those things.
Ah, thanks. Yeah, yeah. The Bear Jew, I like wasn't really that comfortable putting the footage anywhere for a while because I was like mostly naked. But then after a while, I was like, like I do think it's cool and people should climb it. And I posted it on my Instagram, and then I started getting like all these like solicitations from men in my DMs. Like it kind of like caught wind within like a queer community, and like I was just getting like all these men just messaging me for that and leaving like some lewd comments too about like, oh, I hope you fall on my face and
Oh, that's great.
yeah, that was a cool one. And then I think it kind of opened the door for Kiram to come in a little bit more too. Like after doing Copper Tone, I think I checked out that Conversations with Satan and kind of written it off as like, ah, that's too hard. And at the time when I first went out there, we were, mostly going for Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. And maybe it was Chad Parkinson had mentioned that the Arret was a project still or something. And I got stoked on that. But at the time, you had to hike in from the main road. And so it was a much, much further trek. And then in recent years, there's kind of been a road, I guess, that goes straight to it. But I was never like motivated enough to. I think I did that hike out there 2 or 3 times to do Coppertone, and then I was just like, I'm good. Someone else can do this. And then Karam came and made it happen, and that's like probably the hardest line in Ibex, I'd imagine. Uh, and I don't
Yeah.
think anybody's even tried it that I've heard of since he did it.
The Enright brothers, they wrapped down it and they said they couldn't fit their fingers into the crack, so they kind of wrote it off. But yeah, no one else has really tried it that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And then Kiram, I know had told me he put up something cool at Crystal Peak, I believe. Is it Crystal Peak or
Yeah, Crystal Peak. What
some
do you
other
call it?
hard thing? Or
Yeah, the crystal entity. And it's Kiram has an insane ape index. So I'm 6'2" and I have a plus point 0.5. He has almost a full hand on me. And yeah, that thing is really cool. It starts off like compression-y, and then in like very Kiram style, it's very toe hook, heel hook intensive, um, and just pretty cool. Um, it's in a really cool location too. It took me 5 years to get that dude out there. I was like, dude, Ibex is awesome. It has some of the best rock in Utah, and he's Joe's guy, and he's like, no, there's no way. I'm just like, dude, just go out there. And once he did, he uh he went on a tear, man.
totally. Well, sweet. We're about at our time, but thanks so much. Uh, I was just looking at your new updates to the guide, and yeah, 900 problems. That's pretty incredible. That's huge. So,
I know.
congrats on getting it out there, and hopefully this helps folks make the journey or make the journey a little smoother and enjoy all those great problems.
Dude,
Any last words?
not really. I'll leave.
Nice.
Go have fun.
Okay. Sweet.